Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first panel in the Film.Music.Media Symposium 2023 series. I'm so excited about this conversation because we're sitting down with highly acclaimed composer and musician Mark Leggett. Mark has had a long and exciting career in the entertainment industry, creating and performing music for film, television, and his own solo albums, as well as collaborating with icons like Dolly Parton, Werner Herzog, Levon Helm, Kylie Minogue, and many others. Today we have the opportunity to hear from Mark about his musical journey, his creative process, and his thoughts on the art of composing music for film and television. So without further ado, Mark, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Kai. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so nice to have you.
Thank you.
So to start off, I'd just like to kind of get a feel of people's origin stories. I'm curious,
Sure.
kind of if we go back to, what do you remember kind of maybe the first little germ or something that kind of sparked interest in music when you were younger? What was that kind of, was there a catalyst moment for you, or did it kind of come along in a weird way?
There was a weird moment when I was just a little guy. I was probably 4 or 5, and I'm late 60s at this point. So this was a long time ago. It was the 1950s, or probably right around 59. And I remember liking the radio so much, but I really liked it when this one song came on. It was "Do the Twist" by Chubby Checker.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all the rage at that time. And I didn't know what, music was really. And I remember that coming on, and I literally would get on the table and start trying to dance like the guy. And I just really liked that beat, that kind of thing. First time I'd really heard that. And then after that, Chuck Berry. But it took until I was 12, to really pick up an instrument. But I always had an interest in music. And in the mid 60s, at age 11, 12, one of my brothers got a guitar. The Beatlemania was happening. All the 60s music was happening, the early stages of that. And everybody was just enamored with that style. And that's where we started with music. My one brother got a snare drum, one got a guitar, and I ended up taking up the guitar, and just from there on, we were Air Force kids, so we moved a lot.
Okay, so you're
so my first experience with it was in the southern U.S. And then, a few years later, we ended up moving to Guam because my dad, which the island of Guam in the South Pacific, and there was lots of interesting music there. I didn't know anything about the culture, and heard a lot of the native music there, the original sounds, and I didn't know anything about ballophones and Southeast Asian music, and we got exposed to a bit of that, as well as there were a lot of stoner rock guys on the bass as well. So
I bet
there was a mix of that and all these kids who didn't want to be on Guam, listening to Led Zeppelin and everything, and going crazy, kind of metalhead kids. So I was exposed to that, and then then went back up to Spokane, Washington, where I was born originally. That was a whole different music scene up there. I learned a lot. Every time I went somewhere, I hung with guys that were way better than I was, and weaseling my way into bands, and just picking up as much technique as I could on guitar. And ended up in the Midwest before I came out to LA. I was in the Midwest in Kansas City, which is a serious music town. In the middle of the country, and learned a lot of music theory. That's where people were like, wait, you don't know theory, you don't know notes, you don't read. And they really, in 5 years, I kind of got an education just playing with these different musicians up there that were a little further along than I was. And so and then I came out here and started all over, playing in bars, and started in dives, played what we call Deep Valley, way up in Chatsworth. There were these dive bars, and for $20 a night, you could go up and get a gig. And I started doing that, and was always writing songs and music, mostly tracks and songs at that point, not instrumental stuff, but didn't even know what the scoring world was. But I ended up getting publishing deals with Warner Chappell and getting cuts and pop hits in the early 80s with people, that 80s style music, and just kind of snowballed from there. Snowball's the wrong word. It's a very slow ball.
Snowball.
But
it takes a long. I had a conversation with somebody else, and we're just talking about how this kind of path, whether in music, because I'm in the I went to film school, so I'm on the film path.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it just takes a little bit longer. It's just, and going to go into it, it's like, okay, yeah, you see all your friends like buying houses and having kids, and you're still kind of living, doing
Yeah,
that
man.
stuff. And then, but I don't know, our passion kind of drives it, and it's
That's right.
yeah,
I mean, I was locked into a little apartment in the Valley for 12 years in
yeah,
North Hollywood when I got out here. And it was, by the time I left there after 12 years, it was a recording studio. I had a 24 track tape recorder in there. I had a board, a bed, and everything else was, the poor lady upstairs was just driven to madness. But, um, that's just the way it was.
yeah,
You did what you did, and you didn't make any money. I made a little bit, but enough to keep buying equipment. And
right.
I got my
Keep
first.
growing.
I've got a really good royalty check at one point, signing check for a publishing deal back then in the '80s, and it was like, for back then, it was really great. It was like 30 grand, and for a year contract, and I'd never seen that kind of money. And I immediately
Yeah.
went out and bought that 24 track and a console with it. I spent it just like that, but I spent it on. I moved up a couple levels by having that
Yeah.
stuff.
Reinvest it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it helped record and make my product better. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
stuff out there.
I want to dive into, let's jump into, I just want to dive into your collaboration with, of course, music icon Dolly Parton,
Yeah,
as you've scored several of her films like Heartstrings, Coat of Many Colors,
right.
and her most recent film, Mountain Magic Christmas. Um,
Yeah.
I remember my wife and I mean, my wife is a huge Dolly fan, so we saw her at the Bowl, and I remember it was the most
Oh, you
amazing
went to that?
show.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it
Really,
was
really good. Yeah, it
fantastic. So
was
yeah,
great.
tell me, how did this collaboration begin, and what is your kind of your working relationship like?
Well, my relationship initially was with my scoring partner on the Dolly stuff. His name is Ray Bunch, Velton Ray Bunch. Uh, Emmy-winning composer, did the Star Trek Enterprise, has
Yeah.
done, his big show was Quantum Leap back in the day, the original Quantum Leap. And he was a buddy, and he gave me some early scoring tips when I started getting shows in the mid '80s. I started getting some work on my own scoring TV shows, and I didn't really know how to do it. I was coming from a track song kind of world, and
Right.
he kind of mentored me, and we ended up being great friends. And he was Dolly's music director for her television show in the '80s, which ran for a couple of years. Dolly had a weekly special, like a variety show, skits
Right.
and various, musical guests. Every week was different. It was a well-regarded show, and he was her guy. And so when she decided to start doing these narrative, dramatic films, she said, "I want Ray," and Ray called and he said, "I want you." So because because I do so much guitar and instrument stuff. Plus, I have a great scoring studio, small scoring studio, but room for string sections and everything. And this is where I do all my the smaller films that I've done when we're not going out of house for orchestra. But he called and said, let's do the series. And so we worked together. He is a real pencil and paper at the piano scorer,
Yeah.
old school, and he's fantastic. He is the most melodic and nails the scene, and he's really something I aspired to be. Not so much on the tech end, which I have that covered. So with having the studio and doing that stuff for years, so and we write completely differently, but it really worked for the Dolly stuff. So I could come in and do like some of these instruments, dulcimers and I don't know if you can see those
Oh yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
auto harps, and we'll kalimbas and anything else we want, and have violin fiddle players come in, and you know I can create those kind of ostinatos and the motion beds and things, and score on top of that. Then he will come in with his written score, and we will add these to that, or we may go the other way around. But and then we would go to either Capitol or some other room in town with the orchestra, and that was always a treat. And that's where we really Dolly's been over here a few times just to do small things on the scores, but she showed up at Capitol one time when we were doing a scoring date. A few times she showed up, but always a joy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a room full of producers, and everybody wants to see Dolly, and the orchestra's playing, and it's kind of madness trying to get the stuff scored, but it works. And in one tense moment, Dolly came up, and I'm in the booth. Ray's out, my buddy's out there conducting, and there was a tense moment. Something was going down. Something wasn't working. One of the producers was upset about something. Yeah. And so I'm in the booth, and I'm just sort of like, okay, trying to navigate through this. And she comes up to me. She goes, "Mark, I'm so proud of you. Give me a hug." And she gave me this big hug because she felt the tension in the room, and she saw that it was affecting me. And it just, negated that instantly. It was like, she's so cool. She's the boss, and she's also just, she doesn't throw her weight around. She's not like that. She's encouraging.
I think those are the great kind of leaders. They encourage people to do their best. You bring the best out. When if you're tense and uncomfortable, you're going to be probably second guessing yourself.
She's very nurturing and knows what she wants too. Not that she's a wimp. I mean, she doesn't like, she gets what she wants, and her musical sense. The great joy in working with her was on the Heartstrings. That was 8 films all squeezed into a 5-month period, 6 months. It was a real grueling scene. And on the main title and on several of the scores, we thought, wouldn't it be cool? We need a little bit of Dolly's sound, not a song, because the scores were sort of independent of the songs, of her songs, unless they were connective tissue. They were segueing into from a song to the score, or whatever. We would incorporate a bit of her melody, but generally we would score the music, just original music, and we needed that flavor. So she would give us these just wordless vocals, ooh, ahs, and just little ad libs that she did. So you wake up in the morning, you've been working on this music all night, and you wake up the next morning, and there's this folder of files sitting in your Dropbox, and it's Dolly just ad libbing to whatever music you had written, putting these. And when she says, just do what you want with them. So we got to pepper the score with little pieces of that. And that was my favorite part of the whole scoring scene with her.
That's amazing.
Getting to use her voice as an instrument, not as a vocal. She wasn't singing singing lyrics. That was really cool. So
that is awesome. Wow. Yeah. So what was your, you talk about kind of her contributions on the score a little bit. That's pretty cool. But what was your process like with arranging her songs for one of your for Heartstrings?
Well, we did one that comes to mind. We did, each of the 8 films is based on a song of hers, and they took the song lyrics and the story of the song, like Jolene. Everybody knows the story of Jolene, trying to take my man, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they turned that into, they wrote a script around it, and turned it into a story. And so that came up a lot. So we would, play all the openings. It was a matter of having to, learn the part, the signature stuff, and carry that through the score, and then use that as maybe a bed or as an ostinato for the score. Just take riffs out of her songs, and create a score around that, and let that segue into a thing. And sometimes we would try to emulate the track on the record. We would just pick it up and go, boom, we're gonna make this sound like the old record. And that only happened a couple of times, but generally we would start with some sort of signature motif from one of her songs, and tonally or rhythmically, and carry that through and create a piece of score from that. Wow. But when they had to connect, we did stuff like that. We would take it and just take the main riff. Some of her melodies, there's one we did, Down from Dover, which was, I'd never heard this song, but it was about in the Vietnam War, during the Vietnam War, guy and his gal, he goes off to war, she's pregnant with his child, and he doesn't know it. But they created this beautiful story. It was really touching. And we incorporated that melody. It's sort of like it sounds a little like an Irish ballad, very beautiful, sad kind of thing. And we used that melody constantly through the score, and did it with big sweeping strings, and it just all her melodies lend themselves to anything you want to do with them. She's just I don't know, it seems to touch a nerve with everybody.
Yeah, she's amazing.
it's a kind of primal nerve that people get the emotion from her stuff, and her voice, but her melodies as well.
Absolutely. So for Dolly Parton's Mountain Magic Christmas, the scoring was done with a live orchestra, and you use
Yeah,
various acoustic instruments like guitars. Can you talk to more about the scoring process for that film, for the film?
yeah, it was that too. Was a lot of when I showed you these various mountain instruments and things, dulcimers and auto harps and things. It was a bit of that, but the whole thing, it's, you have to see the show. The show was about the story was about uh, it's about them putting on a Christmas special in Dollywood, and
Hmm.
everything goes wrong, and Dolly doesn't like what they're doing because it's all show business, and she wants to get back to her roots, and you know, so we had to do a bit of like show music. You know, if you're in Dollywood and you're up on the stage and she's trying to dance to this thing, you know, when she's not dancing to actual songs with her guest entertainers, guest singers, we would do like almost play on play off music, you know, and then we'd do the
Yeah.
dramatic scoring. When everything goes wrong, we would have to, you know, there was a few tender moments in there as well. But it was all over the map. It was a lot of this, you know, mountain stuff, a bit of show music. There were a couple things that sounded like an old Doris Day Rock Hudson movie where it's a bubbly little orchestra with lots of, you know, lots of, I don't know, lots of charm
Right.
and that kind of thing. It was all over the place, but it was fun to do. You know,
I
and
bet.
I guess it worked. The ratings were great.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
That's
so
amazing.
it's a pretty good. It came out to be a pretty good score. You know, I wish they would release some of that stuff, but they never seem to do that with these these
Yeah,
type
those
of
ones. Yeah, I know
productions.
those ones are.
Yeah,
You know, it gets tough sometimes. I work on shows that sometimes you're just like, oh, I want to get this music out there, and it's just like, come
yeah.
on.
Well, we, you know, I in the early days with some of the first things we did for her, Code of Many Colors back in 2016 or whenever it was. We did a couple of years of Christmas movies, and the score was we're just sweeping big orchestra and several of her songs, and we went ahead and made one at the end and made a soundtrack, you know, album, and couldn't really do anything with it.
Yeah.
Warner says no, you know, it's not
Yeah.
sanctioned, and but you know, we sent it to Dolly and her friends, you know, so
Yeah, it's for the casting
and
crew.
yeah, exactly. So
Well, I
yeah.
mean, I mentioned you know you're using acoustic instruments like guitars and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
speaking of guitars, what was your inspiration for your solo fingerstyle guitar album, Guitars and Blackbirds, and your EP Folktown?
Guitars and Blackbirds was a. I've always done these Beatle arrangements, Beatle
Mm.
songs with fingerstyle acoustic arrangements. Uh, I've worked on it my whole life. I'd take a Beatles song and figure out how to play it acoustically, try to get the melody in there, you know, that kind of fingerstyle guitar thing. And so a couple of years ago, I slowly recorded these things and got them where I liked them and released them, you know, and
Yeah.
it's out there. It's not, you know, obviously not original material, but it's out on all the streaming and everywhere, and it does okay, you know. It's a niche thing. The baby boomers love it, you know. Uh, you know, all the Beatle fans and the '60s fans, you know, it does well with those people, and I also transcribed a lot of it, and a lot of guitar players love it. You know, they'll learn the parts, and you know, I've got the music downloadable for free, the transcripts,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of guitar players
and
who yeah eat that up.
the yeah. So yeah, that's that. The
Yeah.
other the other I should have said transcriptions, not transcripts. Anyway, those transcripts are available on my website, and the other one, Folktown, is just a bunch of original acoustic guitar type music of mine that I've worked on for a while, and finally finishing that up this month and getting that out there, and you know, and trying to take that music and have a video component to it. Other than there are quite a few videos of me playing that stuff that have done quite well, um, but the you know, sometimes you don't want to just have a performance video. So
Yeah.
trying to create some video content on my original stuff to where there's a little bit of a storyline, a little bit of me playing, a little bit of something happening, you know, on the screen, coming up with ideas for that. So it's, you know, the Folktown is a real kind of Americana, uh, you know, that kind of music. Very
Yeah.
simple, you know, but
So in
heartfelt.
your you know life and career of like exploring different instruments, is there anything that you haven't tried yet that you'd love to incorporate in a new project? Any something that you
um,
just have never tried and want to?
You know, I would like to work with various players, and I have in the past with largely violins and singers and stuff, and creating sounds. You know, so in scoring
Yeah.
now, you can have unique sounds, create sounds with software, and you know, you can make an instrument, a keyboard instrument sound out of anything. So,
Yeah.
I'd like to work with more woodwinds and low winds and, contrabassoons and things like that for exploring just sort of sound design sounds and things like that. Any instrument that I see that I don't really know, if I see one out for sale somewhere or see it online, I'll buy it. And then if, and use it to create new sounds using software or maybe I can even learn to play it a little bit, but I can get some kind of sound out of most things except wind instruments. But with the technology the way it is now, everything is music. Everything you could, bang on your head with a spoon, and there, if you want to put a mic on there, you've got a sound and go use it.
Oh no, yeah.
There's some great people out there doing that. Ryan Lott, Sunlux, that guy, he's one of my favorite composers.
I just had interviewed him and Rafik and Ian.
Oh yeah, so fantastic. That score for Everything All at Once, it just blew my mind. And he's very inventive, and he's been doing stuff like that for a long time. I got into his stuff quite a while ago, and just think he's great. And anyway, that's kind of where you can go now with sounds and music, incorporating tonal music with sound design and electronica. But and I like a lot of with all the acoustic stuff I have. I do like a lot of electronic music as well. So
I know. I mean, just finding a palette, finding and mixing things up and create. I mean, that's the joy of it. Finding something new, like trying to old and new, whatever. Yeah.
that, and is it appropriate to what you're working on? And now you can try a million ideas. If you can get a couple of weeks, like many people do this, but you get a couple of weeks with the film or the scene or whatever it is you're working on, and you just try a million things because it's so easy to get things. And just see what sticks. Does that little melody, maybe something will pop up and there's your kernel for the rest of the score. Many people can work that way now and do. I think it's great. It's an exciting time.
Absolutely.
You can capture everything you do now, and you just have to have some taste and be a little discerning. That's the hard part.
Well, talking about you're talking about doing what's right for the project. So I want to jump into another amazing world that you got to work in, with the Doctor Who universe.
Yeah.
Of course, with your score for the documentary Doctor Who Am I? What was your scoring process like for it? And did the series influence you? And what kind of instruments were you using for that?
You know what? I went into that not knowing. When the producers and director said, "Yeah, we want you to do it." I said, "You do?" And I said, "I don't know anything about Doctor Who." And I assumed they wanted sci-fi music, and like the music is now on there. It's kind of, there are epic moments, and there are, it's that whole sci-fi world. And they said, "Oh no, you don't need to know anything about it. It's a story about a guy navigating through that world, and carrying a lot of emotional baggage while he does." So I just sat down and I came up with piano ideas and a couple of melodies that they responded to, and used those, and then got into, they're covering the Doctor Who conventions are much like Trekkie conventions. In America, people dress up. In the States, everybody dresses up, and it's a real show. It's a deal. And so there was that in the show, which I scored once again with some of these acoustic instruments, doing very quirky little rhythmic parts and adding almost a circus-like atmosphere to it, which worked well with those scenes. But then it would navigate or pivot over to Matthew, who's the main character this is about, it's heartfelt. It's a real human kind of story, but peppered with moments of those carnival-like things. And I thought of it like that, of being not circus music, but it's just got that bounce to it. It came out pretty well, and they seem to like it. It doesn't get in the way of the score. There's a lot of, it's a documentary, and it's on site at these conventions a lot of times when they're not one-on-one speaking to the camera. But so there's a lot to compete with. So a little bit went a long way on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like with scoring a documentary, you have to. You're still at the same goal as a fictional film, but you're dealing with a little bit different structure with talking heads and different things, and so you have to kind of navigate a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tough thing sometimes. And then there's some that I've worked on in the past. Uh, that it was a Holocaust documentary a few years back. I recorded the orchestra in Bratislava, one of my first remote sessions that I've done like that, and that was, really treading lightly, but
Yeah.
creating that world of that, the story about Anne Frank, and um, yeah, that was staying out of the way and not pushing the tone, just
Right.
trying to be not neutral, but trying to just I don't know. The only thing I could do is stay out of the way and write some fairly flowing long lines, and just letting things simmer, not try to
Yeah.
hit stuff. It was not like that. And I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, I know it was yeah, with a documentary like that when you're dealing with historical something with that weight of it too. I know you don't want to
Yeah.
be too
Yeah,
manipulative with the music and try to like, that's not
exactly.
like trying to pull heartstrings like forcefully. I think this you have to let the story support the story as much as possible. Let the actual facts, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
made that mistake years ago on an early documentary I did when I was first starting this, and it was regarding Nazis in America or something. And man, they didn't seem to care, but I hit it hard and pretty much made them all, hit them with all the evil sounds that I could and tonality that I could. And it was, I looking back, it's like, oh, that was a mistake. Fortunately, it didn't go very far, but yeah, you can't, that stuff speaks for itself. You just
yeah,
have to capture the right things, I
right.
believe.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump into something that I'm actually a huge fan of, which is My Name Is Earl, which is,
Oh yeah,
which has I think still I think hold up to this day. And of course, the cool part about streaming is that all these new generations are kind of finding shows and reliving through them, and shows that have been
right.
off the air. But and so you decided to go for that score in kind of in a blues direction. And I'm curious, what was the inspiration for the influence, and what was it like? I guess just the whole process of scoring
Yeah.
that show.
Well, when we got the pilot, it was temp that way. It was
Mm,
temp, not with not with the stuff we ended up doing. Um, but they tempt it with a couple of, there's an old 60s song called Spirit in the Sky that is
yeah.
got some, just a great feel to it, and some twangy guitars, not a lot of blues harp or anything like that, but it sort of set the tone. And then we just ended up hiring the great Stan Behrens, who's a well-known blues harmonica player, been around forever and really great, to be the lead instrument, And so, and a lot of slide guitar, a lot of swampy guitar and stuff. But because it all took place in a trailer park, and it was all kind of, I called it a highbrow, lowbrow show, because it was a lowbrow scene, but the writing was smart. The
It was
writing was
so well
really
written.
great,
Yeah, I think
well, so
was so
good.
good.
And
Yeah,
yeah, the producers had tempted the pilot with a lot of that 60s kind of swampy blues music, and it was great. And we sort of stuck to that, but then we got a little more gut bucket with it. And that's another thing where there would also be moments in the show where you have to score something like a musical, The Music Man, because there's some reference to it and they're putting on a goofy play. And then there was the whole psychedelic episode where we got to do a lot of 60s stuff. So it was a real variety, but largely the whole tone of Earl was blues, kind of gut bucket.
and that kind of stayed throughout the entire run of the show. Did it evolve at
Yeah,
all?
yeah.
Or
Well, we evolved a little bit in season 3, and we just started doing some more quirky, kind of odd keyboard music, and immediately got yelled at. So we went right back to blues, and it's like, yeah, you're overdoing it. Don't do too much. So we went right back to the blues harmonica, and lots of slide guitar, lots of broken down kind of acoustic guitars too. I bought a couple of $14 guitars at a swap meet, acoustic guitars that were
That's
just,
awesome.
really terrible guitars, but
Yeah,
detuned them really low. They're totally out of tune. They don't sound good, but we would just I would come up with these phrases and riffs for certain cues that just worked well. You get a close mic in it and it just sounds like trash, but it worked,
yeah,
as long as you put some good sonics under it, a good bass sound. And there were live drums on the score a lot,
yeah,
and it was fun. It was a real rhythm section type scene.
yeah. Is there any
It was
other
fun.
TV project that you've worked on that maybe has kind of sentimental you hold close to your heart, that maybe a personal favorite? Maybe if it isn't a big, hit like My Name Is Earl, but is there something maybe
Yeah.
that you really like
Well,
love that you look back on?
that Anne Frank documentary was
Yeah.
was I think came out well just because I kept the tone down, and I was proud of that. I liked years ago, and I didn't meet him, but we worked, over whatever. There was no real uploading of files back then. We were sending tapes back and forth. Levon Helm of the band, they were in upstate New York recording one of their albums, and the producer, he was going to narrate this documentary on Highway 61, which is the blues highway from Chicago down to the Delta, and it was all about the musical journey, and so he took a road trip, and that's what the documentary was about. They needed a theme, and they were in the studio recording, and the director says, or producer says, "Hey, write something. We're going to send it to Levon Helm, see if they'll record it while they're in there." And they did. And so I had a few notes back and forth, and so I had this main title recorded by the band. That incarnation of the band back then. It was no Robbie Robertson at that point, but it was Levon Helm, and he was using the band. He was the band at that point. Yeah. But really great players. I liked that. I really liked working on. There was a thing called Dinotasia, which was a animated dinosaur show, also based on a thing called Dinosaur Revolution. That was the long form series part. They took this long form series, Dinosaur Revolution, cut it down to a 120 minute, or not even that, 90-minute doc or film, and that was Werner Herzog was involved and was the narrator, and got to meet him and kind of hang out for an afternoon, and that's awesome. That was a real joy. Quite a man. Yeah.
I was on the WB lot going somewhere. Either I was going to a screening or I was visiting a friend or something, and he was walking right by me, and I was like, oh my God, that's Werner Herzog. And I was like, don't bother him. But then looking back, I was like, that's my biggest regret, was not stopping and just like talking for like the 2 seconds. I was like, I'm not gonna leave. I'm gonna leave the man alone. But I was like, man, he's made so many of my favorite documentaries, and his films dating back,
Yeah, he's fantastic, and you could have easily said hi to him, because
I'm sure, yeah,
with him, he was very, very open.
The man ate a shoe, I have a bet, so I'm sure he'll be okay.
You can talk to him. Anybody can talk to that guy. Yeah, that's great.
A man who says I'll eat my shoe for a bet and actually commits to it. That's
as long as he spices it up a little bit.
Yeah, as long as he did properly, prepared it.
That's funny.
Oh yeah, sorry, go continue.
Oh no, that's I just say that was a good experience, just to be in the room with him and work on that and have a lunch, and it was great. Those and I really liked working on the Dolly stuff. Nowadays I just keep working on guitar music and studying music and listening to lots of stuff. That's when I'm not working. I have a little downtime here redoing my studio in this month. So
speaking about your downtime and how you're kind of working on stuff, is that how you, I'm curious about how you evolve how your style has maybe evolved, like your personal style as a musician, as a person, as a storyteller. How has that evolved throughout your life? I'm sure when you were traveling, those stories you were telling at the beginning of when we started talking, when you're in bands and jumping around and moving around, I'm sure that was just like you were soaking up different musical cultures like a sponge, and that of course made an imprint on you. So I'm curious if you ever kind of looked at yourself in the mirror as your musical style, how does it evolve? Are you consciously evolving it? Do you know it's evolving?
As a player, I work on the guitar stuff quite a bit, to the point of getting tendonitis. I worked on it so much where I had to stop for a few weeks because of tendonitis, but I work on that quite a bit, and try to learn many pieces and come up with arrangements of pieces and just write a lot of original pieces. I use a lot of different tunings, and being able to incorporate that, I think, into scoring now.
Yeah,
I am more at ease doing that, and I can start off an idea with guitar or some other stringed instrument I can play, but it won't stay there. It'll end up being orchestrated. It'll end up being going in, and you're playing with all your samplers and all your sounds, and like I said earlier, you can it's so easy to capture everything.
Yeah.
But I think incorporating my sense of guitar playing, Americana type music, not that that's all I play, but also, I studied jazz and theory and improv and everything. as I evolve as a player, it really helps with scoring, because
Yeah.
I realize that the smallest little kernel of something can actually be a big thing in a score.
Right.
Whereas guitar, working on your instrument of choice, you tend to like get through as much material as you can and really excel at that.
Yeah.
Um, it's taught me to slow down a little bit and just take little pieces of music that I can play and go, well, that's so simple on the guitar, but then if you take that simple little idea and extrapolate that into a score,
Right.
with a variety of instruments, whatever you choose, gosh, I'm more aware of that now. Whereas before, I would just try to cram everything into a score or into a guitar piece. Yeah, just
Does the way the industry is moving, does like the do outside, I guess, the environment ever affect the way you evolve your style? Like, oh, this is in right now, or this is where these
sure.
type of scores or movies are really big right now. Do you kind of push yourself? Maybe I should start figuring this style out or that
I
style out.
did for a while, but I just can't. One thing I've realized really quickly, I can't do the epic style that so many people do so well, and
Yeah.
I can, melodic stuff is more my bag, but to build an epic type piece of music and get it to climax at the right time, and that, you can kind of, I pecked at that for a while, but I thought I wasn't good at it. So
Right.
I found I found kind of my niche in doing more organic musical things, and then bending those into a score. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what I'm good at. And I think the thing to do is exaggerate what you're good at. Really
Yeah.
try to nail that down. And once I realized, oh, I kind of have a little sound if I have these instruments, and it's kind of my own little vibe. Sure, I'm sure there are other people doing the same thing, but for me, it was like, oh, I'm really at home with this, and I'm going to just push this. So, I will hear some stuff, and I'll be influenced by a score. Every night, try to watch a movie, and it's like there's always something great in the score these days. And you go, God, I got to try that. Well, how did you do that? And
What's something you watched recently that really stuck out with you?
oh gosh, I liked what Desplat did on the Outfit. I just watched
Yeah.
that, and the tone of that was so great. I had no idea it was him when it started, when the film started. Um, just everything, obviously, everything all at once. That knocked me out.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
I don't know. I just watched a Bollywood thing, which I never watched, called RRR,
Oh
which
yeah,
was a
that's big. That's big now. Yeah.
Bollywood action thing. Buddy of mine just said, "Hey, watch that." And he goes, "Yeah, you probably won't like the singing, but it's really cool." And I got to say, I kind of preferred that CGI to a lot of these superhero movies that
It
are out. It
I
blew my
agree with you
mind.
completely. Yeah.
Those are my new heroes. Those
Yeah.
guys.
I watched
It's
this
pretty
channel
cool.
on YouTube called Corridor Crew, and they have
Uh-huh.
a series called Visual Effects Artists React. They're a bunch of VFX artists in LA, kind of my
Right.
age, but they'll watch and break down things, and they broke down that a lot of Bollywood, not just RR, but they'll look at all the techniques they use, and it's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean,
It's incredible.
it's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I just was like, yeah, Bollywood. Okay, I know it's a bunch of people singing. No, it's not. It's
No,
That's
yeah,
in
yeah,
there. It just Anyway, that music, I thought, God, that's just so different than anybody in LA would do. It's just
yeah.
completely different. And some of it was great, some of it was okay, some of it I thought was, that's a little, yeah. But most of it, I was like, well, that guy had a very tough scoring gig, and
Yeah.
he stepped up to the plate and did it, and uh, uniquely so in a lot of places.
Well,
The
I think
love sound.
they take what you just said earlier, which I think I want to put on a T-shirt. Exaggerate what you're good at. I love that
Yeah,
line, and I
yeah,
think that's what they do amazingly with with Bollywood films. They exaggerate what they're good at, and
yeah. Boy, they've got, it's a whole different world.
yeah, it is.
Um,
Well, you also, I want to, before we wrap up, I want to mention you also maintain a production music library,
yeah.
Scorebuzz Music, which is distributed by 411 Music Group.
Hmm.
What type of music are you creating for that?
It's everything. It's my back
Everything?
catalog. I worked for, gosh, several years, where I owned all my publishing and writing on hundreds of hours of documentary stuff, and every type of music in the world. And at my studio several years ago, we took all this and realized, I'd never really dealt in the production
Mhm.
library world. And I thought, this music is sitting here on drives. Let's format it. Let's remix it, remaster it. It took 2 years to get
Oh,
this thing
wow.
into some kind of shape. But there are, 130 CDs or albums, whatever you want to call them, with just different styles, music from France, or action, generic kind of action stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of the score stuff doesn't seem to do as well, but I ended up doing a lot of tracks for some of these documentaries, and there's a lot of music there, Southern rock tracks. Gosh, we have several geared towards children's shows, because I had worked on a couple of those, owned the publishing. So I thought, I own the music, I can reformat it and repurpose it. It's everything. It's all kinds of stuff, jazz piano stuff. Gosh, all over the place. Just your basic grab bag of production music, and I've been with 411. They co-publish and distribute, and wow. Yeah, that's a great company, really wonderful company. Kristen Adji runs that company, and she's great.
I'm curious, as a musician and as a composer, do you find the value in still kind of keeping the publishing rights of your music? Because I'm seeing all over the news now, not just composers, but big stars, Bob Dylan. I mean, just selling off.
They're selling
their entire catalog, and I'm curious what your take on that is. And are they just trying to get out now while they see?
I think
there's some warning signs of something about to crash, or like.
Well, I don't think they're warning signs. I think it's already happening. Publishing and performance, you're publishing, and when you're on that level of Dylan and Springsteen, of course you're going to sell. Those catalogs are worth, obviously millions and millions
hundreds
of dollars.
Of millions,
so sure, they're going to do that. For my little modest thing, it's I don't know. I'll hang on to it as long as I can. It's not making as much money as it used to, and that's going to continue to be the trend, I believe, for everybody, because the performance aspect of it, performance royalty aspect, is dwindling due to streaming having such low, if non-existent rates.
Yes, yeah.
And I think eventually, it's not as valuable as it was, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep your publishing. Well, you want to just give it to these. If you can get more cash up front for that publishing, that's usually the deal anyway. They pay you less and they let you keep all the rights. Right. Well, there may be more and more of that because the rights aren't worth as much. So I don't know where it's going, but I think it's already changed quite a bit.
I think, absolutely.
But I would still try to keep anything I can. But if they want to pay me quite a bit more to own the publishing, and a lot of places, like obviously when we write the Dolly stuff, there are Warner's, and you don't. That's not on the table. They own everything. When you score a big show like that for a big corporation, but
different ball game.
But for the small stuff, if you can keep it, I would keep it now. Why not? Unless, like I said, they pony up some large dollars.
Absolutely. Well,
which they probably won't.
Right. Well, to finish off our conversation, besides exaggerating what you're good at, what are some maybe some tips you have for aspiring composers in the film and TV industry? Is there like one piece of advice that you abide by? Is there something you've learned that maybe younger folks that are entering should know?
What I learned by not doing it, and realizing I was a dummy for not doing it, is more networking. Go out and meet filmmakers, and don't just hang with musicians. Don't just hang with because that's the easy part.
Competition.
It can be. Or an ally, either way.
Collaborator.
You can team up, but I would just say meet filmmakers. Go to the stuff I never did. I just sort of fell into it. I didn't realize I was meeting a filmmaker in the 80s when he was a director writer, but he was playing bass on some dive gig that I was on down in Redondo Beach, when I was getting started. And we became best friends, and his family was a big TV family. And he's like, "Hey, why don't you score this thing? You got a studio in your apartment." And that's sort of how it started. But that was my form of networking. But I didn't seek out, filmmakers. And I think you got to do that now. You got to go to everything you can and just meet people, play them your stuff, be open, be nice, and say, "Hey, you can't force your CD on everybody or your link, but there are ways to do it. Get to know people sincerely, and then hopefully that will come to fruition. I think some kind of relationship. But I do that. I would, on the musical side, I would just listen to everything that's out there. If you're just getting started, sure, try to emulate as much stuff as you can. See what resonates with you as a musician, and work on if you have a primary instrument, which most people do, continue with that. Don't just stop because you're now scoring. I did that for a long time. I stopped playing, and I think once I started really playing and studying more on my instrument, that I have better musical ideas overall. You should open yourself up to so much more. Absolutely. But that's my advice.
No, it's all great advice.
And be patient.
Patience, yes. As we mentioned before, it'll happen. It might seem like it's not going to happen. It might be difficult, and you do have to overcome that self-doubt. And I've been there, and I know people have. But it's when it does happen, it's rewarding, and and it's fulfilling, and it
and if you don't make $1 jillion, you probably had fun on the way, and you met some cool people, and you make friends, and continue to make music, and anybody can release music now, just there, you can distribute it all over the world very quickly, put up a video somewhere, and you can find an audience. So that's my advice.
Well, Mark, thank you sorry.
Thank you, Kai. I was going to say thank you.
I was going to say thank you.
No. Anyway, this was fun. I appreciate it.
So great. It's so enlightening. Thank you for sharing about your process and I mean your projects and your scores and
thank you.
And I want to thank also my friends over at Impact 24 PR for helping us put this together for this amazing series. And thank you for all who's watching, for tuning in for our 3rd annual symposium. This is a kickoff to another great series of panels and events. But Mark is kicking us off with this one. So Mark, thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.